Hey y'all, how y'all doing? Welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How y'all doing, everybody? Got a little bit of a episode. I was not planning to do this early into the year. I usually, I post a lot on like a couple football forums and things like that. Football's future is one of my favorite. It's it's been a rough year for the Commanders, so this topic kind of just got brought up just because of all the injuries and the state of the franchise. We're below 500, so we always start talking about draft prospects like before the season even starts. It's more of a college discussion thing, so I kind of wanted to bring that into here, but I'm going to kind of equate it with free agency and things like that. The season is not over. There's no panic button, but every team has a window. They're all different phases of building and things like that, and this team was escalated by the selection of Jaden Daniels, Maggie Samerstill, guys like that outperformed, last year and things like that. I expect these guys to be the core of this team moving forward, but every team has this year, and we're hit by injuries this year, man. So it's been rough. So again, I wanted to look kind of forward, just something that I like to talk about and things like that, because I'm always looking at the team building concepts and things like that. So there were there's a lot of players and things that I really, really like coming up in this next year's draft. And, there's a lot of things that come into it. So this is Romello Height right here, man. This guy is an edge rusher from Texas Tech. He's a hell of a football player, man, in college, man. So this was kind of my way of, adding in off-season additions, things like that, players to target, kind of talk about my team, still talk about college football and what's going on there, but I'm also going to talk about some NFL free agents and things like that. Free agency is very, very hard to predict. It's always something where, a lot of good players, they get re-signed by their team. They don't usually walk, but you got to think about where teams are with cap and implications and things like that. So certain players don't get to, stay with their team because they're not, true dynamic forces, and they're going to get paid, top of the market value and things like that. This would be a year that I expect Washington to spend money. This will be the first time I think that they, outside of Frankie Louvu and Javon Kinlaw, this will be the first time that I think we add some free agents from other teams that have a term, actual, years and things like that will have cap implications going forward, higher dead caps and things like that. This will be the first time that I think we add in some players that, really fit what this team is trying to build going forward. That will be veteran additions. So we're going to get into that too, having $96 million. We're the fifth highest in cap space going forward next year. A lot of that'll change by the time that you look at Deebo Samuel. That's a $30 million wide receiver. It's, again, the similar situation of Terry, injuries, things like that. But, depending on what his number is, the impact on the team, he seems happy, things like that. I'm sure that we'll revisit that. I'm sure AP will be dialed into that. Another re-signing I had was Chris Paul, by the way that he's playing the offensive guard position. I think you get a value sign there. If he's asking too much money, then you kind of probably let him walk him, as in the Jeremy Chin kind of role. But if you can get him for a value sign, you probably look to do that. You add the cap space. But the most important are going to be probably Laramie Tunsil and Deron Payne. There's a lot of things about Deron Payne that he balls out, That's Cassius Howe from Texas A&M. He's another aged veteran in college football. He's another player that I'm going to get into just in the background. But Deron Payne, he always balls out in contract years. He had a really, really good year at Alabama before he was drafted. There's a little narrative around him, but he's a really, really good football player. And I think he's taken leadership on this team. And I expect him to continue that rolling forward. He's always been one of our most dynamic defensive linemen. I just think we've lacked, players around him. Not that there wasn't talent. I think a lot of it was schematically under Ron Rivera. Now that it's, Dan Quinn and things, Joe Witt, I just think there's a lack of talent overall, as far as dynamic, young, playmaking talent. Jerzon Newton has definitely come in and helped. I think Javon Kinlaw has come in and helped, and they've filled their roles for this team, and they've both made their name. But I think Deron Payne's a guy you're going to lock up. He's playing his best football. A player you're going to let walk is probably Marshawn Lattimore. I know everybody, that's a pretty easy thing. I'm not going to get any hate for that. Not on a Washington, kind of database and things like that. That's LT Overton from Alabama. He's a player that I really think fits. He's not the most dynamic as far as like size, height, weight, speed, things like that. But man, he is a dynamic big body, run stopping, just brute force kind of player, low center of gravity, which is something you don't really think about a lot when it comes to the edge players. Relentless motor, good player. Kendrick Falk right there from Auburn. They're going to start showing a couple highlights on him. I'm not going to necessarily get into him. I love his length. I love his explosive ability. I think there's a little bit of a thing with the motor and things like that. Sometimes, you don't see the effort, but you do see it there, of course. But this is highlights, so, you're always going to see effort on highlights. But there are things on tape, but you want to see more from this guy because he does have dynamic ability, almost in that Montez Sweat, like height, weight, speed. You see all that, but, the motor game in, game out kind of thing. But he is having a really, really good season. Just somebody that I just kind of question with the AP thing because they are all about, consistent motor week in, week out, 3 years, 4 years of tape and things like that. So he's a reason I didn't really highlight him on my draft fits. But, there's a bunch of positions players that I want to kind of get into and things like that. I'm just going to kind of stick with the edge. Romello Height was a guy that they showed first. I have him a little bit higher. I mean, he's another redshirt senior. The next guy that I got is another redshirt senior. That's Akeem Mizdor from Miami University. I really, really like this guy. I'm sure he'll be highlighted on this later in this episode in the clips. That's a very good edge rusher, man. Ukulele, man. He's a big kind of yesteryear 270, 6'5", he's everything you want from the position. Maybe you don't get the height, weight, dynamic speed, with his size, but man, he is a high motor player. A guy that, has that yesteryear kind of impact, will probably be sniffing around 10 sacks a year in the NFL. I think he's a really, really good player. And he fits the run, plays the run, fits the way that I think Dan Quinn and all of them want to fit this edge position. Caden Curry, he's the edge that I know is going to be high on this clip, things like that. Derek Moore from Michigan coming into the season, he was a guy that I'm really, really high on. I think his draft stock is a lot lower than where I got him ranked, but, that just makes it good for you. When you have a deep edge class in the draft, certain players that you might have rated higher on your list are going to, get knocked down into the second, third round, so you're looking at value and you're looking at players that can come in and have an impact and start and, have a really good role, start early. They might be, schemed in for certain run fits, certain pass blocking schemes, but depending on their talent, their superpower. And then David Bailey, the other edge rusher from Texas Tech, he's a really, really good player. You're going to notice a scheme here, a thing here with my with the names that I'm mentioning, man. There's going to be a lot of Texas Tech. There's going to be a lot of Miami University, man. Like, I really, really like the way these defenses are getting after it in college football this year. Ohio State, dude, anytime you go to the Ohio State well, you're getting a top premier talent, So again, Ohio State's going to be up there. The Michigan's blue blood, like the blue blood lifelines, man. Like they're always going to be mentioned at the top. The LSU's, the Notre Dame's, the Ohio State's. When you're getting the top premier talent, Clemson, with T.J. Parker and things like that, he's going to be a guy I'm sure is highlighted on this list higher. In fact, he's right now. And then Reuben Bain Jr. This is a guy that unless Washington pretty much loses out, and I just want to kind of get into the state of that, wherever Washington is, right now we're projected to be 12th. The whole reason of this is not to give up on the season. This is not a look forward. It's just kind of like a different episode for the, middle of the year for Commanders fans, things like that, just names to keep looking forward to. When you're seeing the holes on the defense, sometimes you get blessed by having a bad season. Sometimes adversity is the best thing that can happen for a team. When you have the number 2 overall pick, you hit a grand slam and Jaden Daniels, where he's struggled with injury this year. I think after the success that this team had, I think it was a really, really good thing that sometimes these injuries actually played into it. It sucks as a fan to watch it, but let's be real. This team needed a lot of pieces. The team that AP, took over, the team that DQ took over. Cliff Kingsbury really, really schemed it up last year, man, with that offensive line in that front, man. And it was systematic how we were impacting the teams. And Terry McLaurin was playing out of his mind. We all want Terry back. He's a hell of a player, man. He's a hell of a captain for this team. But I think he's a little humbled by this experience this year. He has always been healthy. He's a guy that we know loves football. I think he has a sour taste in his mouth because of the contract year. But this is just something where I do believe that Terry is a team first player. Ruben Bain Jr., man, this dude is an absolute stud. Absolute stud. Sorry, but getting back to Terry McLaurin, this guy is a leader on this team, man. And, sometimes I think you have to be humbled. Last year, the excitement of the team was the quarterback. It was the new taste of just winning and the excitement and, feeling like you got one. That was a great feeling for fans and things like that, man. And you should be excited about the future, just because you're having a bad year, all these injuries. Sometimes this is the best thing for this team going long term. We have an aging roster, and, currently we don't have a lot of picks in the draft. Next year, we don't have a second round pick. We don't have a fourth round pick. But if we're picking higher than expectation, was coming into this season, maybe you can move back because of the amount of edge rushers that are in there. There's a surplus of premier talent in this draft at wide receiver, at, edge rusher, at linebacker, at quarterback. There's going to be quarterback needy teams. Maybe you can move back. You can accrue maybe even a pick next year when you're going to be in Washington for the draft, so you have an extra first round pick or something like that, and then accrue other draft picks in this class. And, now you're talking about rebuilding the lifeblood of this organization through the draft. And that would just be something very, very beneficial to this team. I'm very, very excited for what this draft class has to offer. I really do expect by the end of this draft that we have a lot more picks than what we have going into it. There's a ton of players in this draft to get really, really excited about, and just because we don't have a ton of picks currently, I expect AP. This is Jordan Tyson, man. This is a wide receiver that we're going to talk about. We're going to highlight the wide receiver position as well. But he's another reason that a team maybe would move up because, he's having a hell of a year at ASU. He's really, really been a reason why ASU is ascended to the level that they were last year, and they're being very, very competitive this year. He's also elevated the play of Sam Levitt, I believe, who's a talented quarterback in his own right. He's grading out really, really good. I mean, you can look at PFF grades or you can just watch the tape. I mean, he's a very, very crisp wide receiver. I think Mekhi Lemon is a little bit better. Carnell Tate has better size. Denzel Boston is somebody that I'm really, really high on. And then one of my favorite players in the whole draft, and it's not even just because he's from Miami, is CJ Daniels. I just think this dude has excellent hands, man. And I just feel like he fits everything that this offense would really, really pair up really nice with Terry McLaurin. I think it would be a 1A, 1B kind of thing. And I think you get CJ Daniels a little later in the draft than some of these first-round guys that are going, because I think edge rusher is going to be the value position for this team. I think we're going to find the player that we really, really love staring us in the face whenever we make our selection, which if we lose more games than anticipated coming into the season, which is looking like we're on pace to do, I think you maybe move back and you still get your guy, and then you accumulate more draft capital, and you're able to make a CJ Daniels pick where you wouldn't have been able to make it because you didn't have a second rounder coming into it. And things like that. Or maybe you're looking at like a Mekhi Kamara, the edge rusher out of Indiana, or, the edge rusher Derek Moore out of Michigan that you can get in the second round or something like that, depending on, the value of the pick that you make in the first round, whether it is linebacker, like Jacob Rodriguez, Sonny Styles, or Kyle Lewis, the Pittsburgh linebacker. I think you can get a little bit later because of his size, but his playing ability, you get him in the third round, and that's a guy that I think is a day one starter. And that's the cool thing about the draft, man. The draft is always about value at the pick. It's not about reaching for a position. This draft class just happens to have a lot of players at a lot of at the positions that we need, and they have a surplus of talent. Now, you don't want to just draft a player at those positions just to draft a player, but when when they fit systematically and they can transcend what you're doing at the position currently, and they're going to be a day one starter because the talent is probably graded higher than the selection you're making it at. That's how the draft works for you. And this is a perfect year for this team to have the players at the positions that we really, really need moving forward. So it's when the talent meets the need, it meets the value, it all comes together. It just so happens that this draft is really, really lining up for this team that we might actually just be able to get a steal value at a certain position that we really, really need moving forward. to get into something else that I don't usually talk a lot about, man. I usually don't get into the veteran things, but for the podcast and things like that, I mean, these are going to be names that you guys know, around the NFL. They're not in college. They're in, they're around the league. You can check up on them. They're going to be free agents in this year. So one thing that I want to get into with the free agent guys that I'm going to mention is the narrative of this offseason for me, and I'm sure it is for AP. I'm sure, dude, we had to fill holes. We had to bring in leaders. We had to start implementing a system. Some of them older veterans are slowing down, and you can see it in Bobby Wagner. Marshawn Lattimore just never came in and had the impact that you expected from him. He just doesn't look like the old version of himself, and that's okay, man. It happens. But you can't be married to players like that. You got to be able to move on and, just admit a mistake. And teams make mistakes. I mean, AP is a first-time GM. He was never going to make every decision properly. And honestly, I was a big proponent for trading for Marshawn Lattimore. So, I mean, at the same time, it's like you want somebody because you think they improve your team. And at the time, it did. It just didn't work out. Sometimes things just don't work out. But getting younger at the position would be a very big benefit. And honestly, I think two other really strong positions in this draft, and this is why I think moving back is going to be something that we do to where we didn't do it before. This last year, they just said Josh Conley Jr., the value was too high. Trey Amos, the value is too high. I think you look at the production that they're giving you on the field, and you see the value was too high for them to pass up. This year, there's so much of a surplus at positions of need. We're going to probably be a lot more active in this draft. I see us making a lot of moves in this draft, up and down the board, depending on the round. I see us accumulating a lot more picks and maybe even get a pick moving forward in the 2027 draft. But back to the veteran players that are going to be walking. Now, you always look at free agency, and you have to understand you're probably overpaying for a player. That just is what it is. So if you're going to overpay for a player, you want age to be a factor into this. You can't be overpaying for 30-year-old players. This is why every player that I'm mentioning on this list is 28 years old or younger. Now, that's not going to be the case because some of these players are going to get locked up because of their age. But some of these teams that they're coming from, you would say, oh, they're not going to let them go. They wouldn't let them go. Why would they let them go? Well, the reason is they probably, most of these players on these teams, they have veteran quarterbacks that they're paying top of the market value to. The Buffalo Bills, the Green Bay Packers, things like that. Green Bay Packers are paying Micah Parsons and Jordan Love, and, they're going to have other players that they need to pay. So you can't always keep everybody, and you can't pay red chip players blue chip value when them players know they can go out on the market and get blue chip contracts. So yes, in free agency you are overpaying. That's just the narrative. The cap always goes up. And certain teams, when they have, this is the value of having Jaden Daniels on a rookie contract. So you're able to make a little bit of these overpay splashes, but these players are going to be coming off the books or be re-signed or reworked deals by the time that you're working Jaden Daniels' second contract and things like that, where he's really going to break the bank as long as he's staying healthy. So one of the key targets that I made for this team was AJ Epinesa, the edge from Buffalo. Well, why do I put him in here? Because why would they let AJ Epinesa leave? 28-year-old edge, very, very impactful, plays the run very good. He's a high motor player. He's not like a, top of the league statistical, dominant guy, but he is a guy that has an impact week in and week out. He's a very good rotational player. He's a high motor. You know what you're getting from this guy every snap. He stays healthy. Had a little bit of an injury concern, I think, in college, but he has stayed healthy in the NFL for the most part. AJ Epinesa, the Buffalo Bills edge, the reason that I have him on this list is maybe a contender, a guy that's going to walk. He is a very good scheme fit. I think his motor, the character, everything lines up with everything that AP and Dan Quinn want on this team. He has the type of attitude that you want on this team. Well, why would why would Buffalo let this guy go? Well, because edge rushers are very expensive. Well, you got, a lot of players on Buffalo. They paid the running back this year. Running back is a position that you don't typically give top market value to. Well, the way that the NFL is going, that's starting to shift. But paying James Cook, having Josh Allen on the contract that they have him on, the defenders that they have locked up on top market values, the way that the offensive line is structured schematically through the cap, they have top of the market value on those books too. So AJ Epinesa is probably a guy that they're looking at and they say, man, we can't pay this guy $28, $25, $30 million a season, at the edge position because of the impact that he offers. Well, He's probably going to walk because of that. Maybe do they franchise him? You don't know. This is why free agency is so hard to predict going forward. But I put him on there because of the state of their franchise and the amount of, top of the market deals that they already have on the books for the type of player that this is. This is usually a player that, is probably going to walk, and he's going to make top of the near top of the market value, even though his impact with Buffalo isn't top of the market, but he is a consistent player, and that's the type of player that you want. The age fits. You're going to get the best version of this guy going forward under his contract, I believe. And I think he just fits what you do systematically. So he's a player that I highlighted. Another player that I don't think he walks just because I think this dude is a really, really good player. Is he, Roquan Smith, when he was getting paid or anything? But I think this guy's best football is before him. Maybe this guy isn't as more likely to stay with the team as the other guy that I'm going to mention from this team. But Quay Walker, the linebacker from Green Bay, man, this dude is everything you want from the linebacker position. He would fit with Frankie Louvu. Excellent. Maybe that allows you to go into the draft and not have to take a Jacob Rodriguez or a Sonny Styles. Maybe that allows you to take a Kyle Lewis to develop down the road. 26 years old at linebacker for Quay Walker, you're going to get a top market deal. At 26 years old, you make that deal. I mean, this is a guy that fits. This is a guy that is relentless. I mean, just a run-stopping, edge-pursuing defender from the linebacker position. This is why I don't know if he necessarily hits the market, but with Jordan Love, with the offensive linemen that are going to need paid there, all the wide receivers that are going to start coming up, you've got to start picking and choosing these players and who are. I think this guy is more of an identity player to Green Bay, so I think he's more of a likely candidate to get franchised and then locked up, but just a top of the market player, man. I mean, this guy is truly special. At the linebacker position, I think he is like top 10 in the league. So does he get paid? More than likely, but I wanted to put him on there because he just fits everything that we need on defense. And then, like I said, the next player is probably more likely to leave, but the positional value is higher for this player. So at 28 years old, Devontae Wyatt from Green Bay is probably a little bit more likely to be the one that re-signs with Green Bay or is franchised and then locked up long term. Again, I put both of these players on there because there's a decision to make in Green Bay, paying Micah Parsons, paying Jordan Love, the running back, the receivers, the offensive linemen, the other defenders that are already being paid on the back end. Devontae Wyatt or Quay Walker, you can't pay everybody. So that's why I put both of these two players, because both of these two players are the type of attitudes that you want on your defense. Kenneth Walker was a running back that I kind of like. I like his bruising style. I think he fits with Bill. I think he would be a good complementary running back. Kenneth Walker has had, really decent production, but not top of the market production. I think this, the running back position is a little devalued. I think this is a guy that you can get for a team friendly deal. And he fits, and he's, for the most part healthy. Running backs always have lingering injuries, misses a game every here and there, but he was a player that I really wanted to, highlight in this episode. Jerome Ford was also another running back that I think he's going to walk out of Cleveland, and he has a physical bruising style. He was a player that I like coming out of Cincinnati. That's going to be something that I think is a narrative here. Is a lot of these guys are players that I liked coming out of college. They've transitioned very well for their team. Maybe didn't have the overall top end impact on their team, but because of the state of the franchise with these guys, contractually, like whether it's the, Myles Garrett for Jerome Ford or Kenneth Walker and Sam Darnold and, Jackson Smith and Jigba coming up and all that. Like I said, there's a reason contractually why these guys are going to leave, and can't pay these guys top of the market value. Jaquan Brisker, the strong safety. I have mentioned it many times that I did not like the idea of, Jeremy Chin leaving this team. I thought this was, a little bit of a mistake, kind of letting him walk. I didn't think $8 million was too high for a player in his age with his physical attributes and the way that he fits systematically. But a lot of the thing with free agents is they have to sign. They have to want to sign here as well. So I can mention all these names, but they have to want to also put a pen to paper with this team, or did they have another offer somewhere else that they're offering too much? You can't really stretch it. There's a reason why free agency is so tricky to predict. But Jaquan Brisker is a player that I think fits. If you watch the Bears game, Jaquan Brisker was the guy that got the interception on Jaden Daniels, kind of played his eyes. He's a really good back-end player with a physical element to his game, and he's athletic, he's rangy, he's the type of safety that you want. He comes up and tackles, plays the run game, and you could tell in the Bears game, man, he was having a very physical impact on the team. Did the Bears let him go? I don't know, because the Bears, they have Caleb Williams on their rookie deal, but they also have more top-end veterans that they're paying. They have a lot more higher contracts on their books than the Washington Commanders do. So he's a player that I feel like, is he going to want top of the market value? Who knows? But I think he's one of them decisions that, teams have to start making, because they have Johnson and, premier corners on high top market values, Montez Sweat and things like that. But some of these guys are going to be coming off the books. A under the radar signing, these are two under the radar guys that I kind of like. Both of them I really, really like coming out of college. These are not going to be top of the market values. These are the kind of signings that, AP has made so far, but this is like Wanye Thomas, 26. He was a good safety, big physical bruising safety coming out of Georgia Tech in his draft class that I really, really liked. Height, weight, speed. He would almost be in the Jeremy Chin role as far as what I'm saying, where you look like his age, 26 years old, best football is probably ahead of him. Not the first round player, but a player that when you watch him on field, he played in Dan Quinn's defense already, and he had his best years under Dan Quinn. So this might be one of those value signings in free agency that you look at and you're like, oh my God, you paid this guy, $5-6 million a year, but he comes in and then he outperforms his contract because of the age, because of the measurables, because of the way that he translates in this scheme. Nakobe Dean is more of a risk player. Everybody knows him probably coming out of Georgia because he was a top-tier player in Georgia's defense when they were running for the national championship. He's 25 years old. He has kind of struggled to stay healthy with the Eagles. Like I said, he's more of a risk player, but he's a player that I really like going forward. And then Isaiah Likely, the tight end from Baltimore. 26 years old. He's a guy that just, he's been locked behind Mark Andrews. I think Baltimore would lock him up, but he's had some things in his own right. And then two of my favorite players coming into this, AJ Epinesa and Quay Walker were definitely my favorite players, but two players that were really my favorite. One was Wanye Thomas, and then the other one was Tyreek Woolen, the cornerback out of Seattle. There's some trade rumors about him this offseason. I think he's underperformed this year, but this is a guy that has the height, weight, speed, and every measurable that you look for from the cornerback position. I think he fits the narrative of what we need from our number two player. I think this guy fits perfectly, and he's a scheme fit to what Dan Quinn wants to do on his defense. So again, these are a bunch of names that I wanted to throw out there. Everything's going to change as the draft season comes around. Injuries are going to change draft stock. Teams in the offseason are going to lock up their players that they prioritize and things like that. So some of these guys aren't going to be available. But, outside of the AJ Epinesa or the Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker kind of matchup, man, I think a lot of these guys are going to be available. And I think they're going to be really, really good impact players. And these are guys that I think fit systematically what this team wants to do. It's just about the pairing meeting the, value in the contract that they sign. You're not going to give this guy, you're not going to give Jaquan Brisker that, Landon Collins type deal. You're just going to let him go sign that deal with another team that's willing to overpay him. That's why free agency is always so critical. And it's just something that I wanted to talk about. I thought it would be a fun episode. The Washington Commanders have been struggling with injury and things like that. This is why I kind of wanted to get into this, because it kind of meets what I do with the draft prospects, players in need, when I'm seeing the grading and how they're coming out. And then, with adding in some free agency fits for kind of fun. This isn't me chalking up the season or writing it off. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of value in this offseason, a lot of additions made in this offseason. I think this team is going to pay a little bit of money outside of the building. And I think it's going to have a big impact for this team moving forward. To kind of retool this roster, and I think there's going to be a lot of things done on draft day that really accumulate more picks for this team going forward and kind of set up this team, looking ahead for the way that I think AP wants to build this roster. And I'm just, that's why I want to get into this, because, when you lose to Dallas, you're coming off of a Monday night game to Chicago that you lose last second with a field goal. It's hard as a fan to kind of, be excited and things like that. That's why I wanted to give us something different to kind of talk about. And I just thought it would be fun, man. So again, This is Cody with the Blue Chip Podcast, man. I really, really appreciate you guys. Like, comment, subscribe, anything that you want to do, to talk, be interactive. I will comment back to you and everything like that. It's just something that I love doing is talking football. So, again, thank you guys for, checking out this pod, man. Hopefully you stayed to the end and hopefully enjoyed it. And, like I said, if you have anything to comment on, I can work on something, whatever. I appreciate it, man. So thank you guys for sticking around and have a blessed week. Stay safe. Peace.